Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we will get into the PowerPoint in a minute here. Here we go. So, the outline for today is, welcome, checked everybody in. Public comments in this virtual environment are via email. I checked with Rebecca a few minutes ago and she hadn't received any via email. If anything has changed since then, Rebecca will pop into our meeting and advise us of that. We'll have a very brief inclusion activity. Then we'll take up the one-time recommendation topic. And towards the back half of the meeting, I will take some time to go over the next steps of the process just to make sure we're all on the same page with that. And again, I haven't forgotten our discussion from the last meeting that when we all kind of get this through to the summer, at the time, this wasn't really kind of something we'd anticipated when we had this discussion. It'd be great to bring the committee together in a more social setting for some snacks, dessert, pie. I know was discussed at the last meeting. Maybe Ezra can bring us a bag of those chocolate chips. But whatever your preferred snack is, hopefully we find a way to have a social get together at some point later on when we can. So, committee purpose, and you have been stalwarts working at this with a lot of effort and a lot of commitment and integrity over the last year plus, has been to review our current content, recommend updates, which you did about 7-8 weeks ago. And then we are going to reconvene the committee next year to review and monitor the progress. Again, a reminder about our working agreements. And now on to our inclusion activity. So just as an icebreaker, and you certainly have a right to pass on this, but if we could just kind of go around the group, what is one positive or engaging activity you have enjoyed while social distancing in our current situation? So think about that for a moment. A positive or engaging activity you have enjoyed while social distancing in our current situation.
I can share.
And I'll start. Before the vote turned good, well, actually, Ezra, why don't you start?
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were going to call on people or if you were waiting, so I didn't want to make you wait awkwardly.
Okay.
I think that one of the things I've enjoyed is having, we have a good amount of family time where we have dinners together just in general and things like that. But it's been fun to go on more walks and bike rides and not feel as rushed in that sense. Mm-hmm. So I think the time with family and the time outdoors has been nice.
Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay, Jody.
It's been really good for me to kind of take a step back and realize that it's okay for me to take back, because I've been going with work and all the hats I wear. It's been kind of nice to kind of relax a little bit. And for me to have my daughter home from college has been very nice. I don't think it's so nice for her because she'd rather be there, but we've been actually, unlike Ezra, it's hard for us to really sit down for dinners and do things as a family because we're always going somewhere, or I share time with my son. So it's been very nice to have family meals and have my daughter home a couple months earlier. And as Ezra said, doing stuff outside too. It's been just kind of slowing down and reconnecting to myself and my family. It's what I'm enjoying.
I've learned how to play video games with my kids online. I never knew how to do that. I've learned more technology than ever before of how to Zoom. And even at work, I've learned how to do Zoom visits with patients. And that's been I thought it was going to be a huge challenge, and it's not. I just think healthcare is going to change incredibly over the next 6 months to more of that type of care.
Okay, Morgan and Kristen? I saw a hand there.
Oh, yeah. I think definitely having more family time and getting outside and kind of walking the dog and hanging together, and we're completing puzzles and I don't know, chilling, and that's been lovely. And it's really interesting to go from being on Zoom all day long and then just shutting your computer and then going downstairs and voila, you're home. So that transition there hasn't really been, that's been kind of nice, just to kind of be able to jump back into family stuff.
Probably finishing school earlier, so then you're off for the day, for the week.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Well, I can you? We've done some puzzles as well. We've never really done any large puzzles as a family. My daughter's good friend's family does quite a few of them. So early on, we borrowed some from them and it was quite fun. There was at least one good day of everybody except for the oldest engaging in it. And who could put the last piece in was fun. So yeah, that, and we've been playing some beanbag bag toss games outside when it's been nice out, and that's been fun. So yeah, we live on the lake, so we're really looking forward to getting the boat in soon.
Yeah, very, very gradual spring that we've had. So, puzzles. Who would like to go next? Thank you, Michelle.
I can go.
Sure.
One of the things that's been really enjoyable is that we are engaging in text messages with family members that usually kind of shun the whole idea of a group text and, sort of getting stuck in that black hole of those texts going on and on and on. But we've seen some just really funny memes and some very funny videos and, just shared some verbal sparring in a really fun way that we normally don't get to do. So that's been very enjoyable, actually.
Nice, very nice. Who would like to go next? And there's always the right to pass. You don't have to share. So.
Well, I've been retired, so it isn't too much different being home, but we've enjoyed biking a lot more than we have in the past. So when the weather's been halfway decent, we've been out. And it's nice to see how many people are out biking, and families are biking, and families are walking their dogs and things. So that's been great to see.
Thank you, Judy. And for those of you who came on a little later, Judy is on our Board of Education. She's the chair of the Curriculum Committee. And because the Curriculum Committee will be taking up these topics fairly soon, Judy volunteered to join the meeting so she could hear the discussion firsthand, and I'm just very happy that Judy's had the opportunity to join us. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
Peyton? Is anybody having trouble with Peyton's audio?
We can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't.
I don't see them either.
Hmm.
So this is interesting. Peyton, you're not on mute, but for whatever reason, your volume might be down or something.
No. I know all the technical difficulties.
Sometimes if you go in and out, it'll work. Do we have a chat box at all, Tim?
We do have a chat box.
You can write it in the chat box. I don't see it on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have a chat box. Let me.
It on the bottom, like I've seen it in other things. Maybe it's somewhere else. So he could type it in the chat box.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah, what did I do with the chat? Oh, you know, I turned chat off because it's a public meeting. That was why. So, Peyton, I'm wondering, try coming out and coming back in and see if that helps with the sound. And then when you get in, oh,
Wait.
I saw, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. I is going for runs, and then I'll try to like run to either like a hiking trail or some sort of like forest area, and then try to kind of like explore and go through the trails.
Nice.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll just conclude by when the weather was not as good, it was a chance to catch up on some shows we've been meaning to watch for a while, but just hadn't had the opportunity to get to. So we finally finished Man in the High Castle the last season, so that was a plus. And now that the weather is turned milder, we are getting into the garden, and I don't know if we'll be able to do an asparagus check tonight after the meeting or whether that's on our radar tomorrow, but the asparagus is showing signs of progress, so that's always a welcome thing. So glad everybody's finding happy things to do in this unusual time. So our meeting outcomes for today are to talk about some requests for some one-time recommendations for next year only due to the COVID situation. And related to the 8th grade piece, would like to get some sounding board feedback from you as a committee on the 8th grade materials, you know, that I think would be helpful both for how we look at the materials and thoughts on you know, language in the learning targets for the future. And then, as I said, talk about next steps on, you know, the board process, parent engagement, and the future work of this committee as our teachers work to kind of detail out the updates. So, oh, go up. There we go. So due to the COVID emergency, actually, let me do that. When we made the transition to remote learning, it occurred before the 4th and 5th grade units were 4th and 8th grade units were conducted. So I want to deal with one at a time here. We've had to make some adjustments, and these adjustments would involve some changes potentially to the scope and sequence, which is why wanted to bring this group together. So, and Brenda can maybe speak to the 4th grade aspect in a moment here, but you know, with 4th grade, our initial thinking was to not do anything with the 4th grade offering and compact the 4th grade content into 5th grade next year when this group of students moves along to 5th grade. One thing that we are still looking at will be our options for providing home parent access just that are used in the unit. But the way that works is those are in a DVD format, and we don't know if the publishers have streamable versions of those, and Brenda's actually volunteered to help out and check on that. So it's still possible we might provide some home access to parts of the 4th grade content, but what I'm looking for is a recommendation from the committee that just on a one-time basis, we don't deliver it in 4th grade and we combine the topics next year for 4th and 5th into 5th grade. Brenda, do you want to speak to this at all?
Yes, just for a moment. Thanks, Tim. You know, one of the things as we approach spring in 4th grade, as a 4th grade teacher, we recognize that things happen, you know, from a developmental perspective, physically with girls starting pretty quickly in 4th grade. And I knew we were having this meeting tonight. So today when we were meeting as a grade level team, I talked with my colleagues about this topic, and we all to a person, and this was just at Arboretum, We all to a person agreed that we do need to provide some information for parents to share with children. But obviously this would just be kind of a one-time sort of thing, as far as the streaming piece of it, I would say. But the thing that girls in fourth grade often start their periods during fourth grade, and they and or over the course of the summer, and we all notice that boys and girls really start to need to use deodorant about this time of the year when they are playing outside and things like that. So we know that there's some content, just minimally, that parents should be talking to their kiddos about. And so I reached out to, at Tim's request, I reached out to the other fourth grade teachers in our district, and they are also in agreement that we need to provide at least some minimal coverage for families on this kind of one-time basis. But I do also want to make it really clear that going forward, like we have in the past, parents will always have access to the materials. It's just this year it would be them having a little bit more access, perhaps in the streaming of the videos that we use. Sorry about that. In the content, they'll have access to the content like they have in the past. Not that they wouldn't going forward. It's just this would be a different year.
So I think what we're thinking is we might have to compact some next year or compact the entire thing. And it's really going to be dependent on whether there are streamable versions of the videos available that the publishers will allow us to deliver in some way, shape, or form to our households. And that's still an unknown to us at this stage. So, that's what we are suggesting for fourth grade. There's still a little uncertainty about how we would go, but some will have to move into fifth grade, and how much is going to depend on what kind of access we can provide to families at home.
Tim, could you just go back?
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a question. So what is the stopping point or the difficulty in providing this information now? Is it the information that we provide and how we provide it, that we can have these groups together to do it? Or Brenda, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. I think if
So there are a few aspects to it, and I'll let Brenda chime in a moment. I mean, the biggest one is our videos are on DVDs, not streamable.
Okay.
So, and they're an important part of the unit. So that's the first question. And then in terms of how instructors facilitate it, Brenda, you could.
Yes, I think, Barb, I think the concern would be really showing, again, we'd have to show the videos somehow in a streaming format to the kiddos to see, but also because we as a district have really not been using a synchronous platform, meaning we're not, really virtually instructing live sessions. We're using at the elementary levels, we're using a platform called Seesaw, and students log into that, they get their lessons, they see videos that we create as teachers, and they have the content that way at the fourth grade level. So it would be a bit different, I think, for us as teachers to try to teach this kind of content online. And that's just my humble opinion. I think it would be difficult to do.
And we don't want to put it on the parents to say, hey, here are the topics that you should be touching on with your kids, and without resources for them.
Well, I think, Tim, you can speak to this, but I know that, as a public school, we're certainly required to provide that curriculum to our students and teach the human growth and development. But I think that parents, they would need something to launch those conversations, because quite honestly, many of the kids, the work that we do in the classroom each year with human growth and development is oftentimes all that they see or all that they hear. Particularly for our students who have, less resources at home, less online access at home, and things like that. If I'm understanding your question correctly.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
If 8th grade is using a new learning materials that are readily available to be streamlined, why can't we do the same thing for 4th grade?
So I think, yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
I was going to say, I don't think it's that we can't, Michelle. I think it's just that I'm sure in some publishing companies what they use is streamable. I just don't know yet if in the company that we get our DVDs from has it on a streamable platform at all. But again, in the elementary levels, we're using the platform, the Seesaw platform, and I think trying to switch that up after all of the remote learning and technology learning that we've been doing over the last several weeks, I think it would just be too much on teachers. And I mean, we're kind of drinking from a fire hose from technology as it is. So I think it would just be difficult to try to launch that yet this year.
I think, two other factors on that are the age of the children, and also, and again, these are not, gigantic units, but I mean, our target for the amount of learning activities for elementary kids is roughly 2 to 3 hours a day. Now, by 4th grade, that's on the 3 hours a day end of things. Whereas by middle school, we are looking for that to be a 5 to 6 hour day. So there's more time in what we think of as the 8th grade virtual day than there is for the 4th grade virtual day. And so we are, as the students are older in our system, and Michelle, you have students at different ages in the system. I think what we're asking of the high school students in terms of a time commitment is a lot greater than what we're asking of the elementary students. And part of that is because with the younger kids, there has to usually be some adult facilitation just with the technology and things like that. So we're being a little more cautious a lot more cautious actually, at the elementary level with how much of our full program we're delivering via remote learning.
Got it.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if we agree with this today, we're wanting to compact the current 4th graders to have it in 5th grade, but the 4th graders for next year would get it in 4th grade.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I have an incoming 4th grader. I just want to prepare, that's what I was thinking from a parent, if a parent would have a question, like, we're just going to do it for the current 4th graders that weren't able to get it this spring. Okay,
yes.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah. And obviously we're hoping that next year will be business as usual. But even if we do have some unanticipated situations, if these public health concerns linger or reappear next year, our intention, I think a lot of decisions that have been made in a very rapid period of adjustment this spring that, I think given the circumstances, I mean, everybody's been trying their best. I think given the circumstances, there's a lot our teachers should take great pride in. And really the way our kids have risen to the occasion, I think they've done great too, as well as the parents who are supporting the children at home. But should we have to do anything like this next year, we would hope to more advanced planning to be able to more completely deliver, our full program, even if we had to resort to remote learning at times next year. So, any other questions on the 4th grade aspect?
I think, one, thanks for all the work, and Brenda, wow, to be able to connect with your teachers, that's great. That was my big concern of, as I look at the different things that the students cover at that time, wanting to make sure those young ladies are equipped. That's a big deal because I think many are probably covered at home with parents who are really involved, and others that could be devastating to not get the information and support that they need. So, and having you know, third grader on Seesaw, I feel the pain. And something I'm not sure, you know, it sounds like there's a challenge with the curriculum and if it can stream or not. I don't know if it's a possibility. I don't think we need to discuss it much, but something I'm not sure if it is finding an alternate resource that's even a link to something that is streaming that isn't copyrighted in a way that it couldn't be used, that could be shared. And even if it's not on Seesaw, I know with our third grade teacher, we get emails throughout the week. And even if it was like, parents, here's a link, please check it out. And a bonus would be if there's a couple discussion questions. I'm not sure. I don't want to burden anyone, but that's just something that came to my mind of how can we equip these kids and parents to have this crucial discussion. Another one, as I look at the different things, I think we can just do our best right now, right? And it's not what we'd like, but I look at the different topics, and one is internet safety. And wow, if we're going to be in this mode all summer, and these kids are going to be on the internet with maybe not much supervision, that's something, I don't know if there's any kind of way we could touch on that. And then it's home alone safety. I can imagine there's a number of families in our district who are going to be leaving their fourth graders at home. Not because they want to, but because there's not, you know, I know that parents are in some ways. So if their parents are going to work and they're just home alone, I'm concerned for that. So if there's some way that could be touched on. I also think about the inappropriate touch, personal safety, and you know, all these things, like if the kid's home and you know there's a friend, there's a number of things that I think are important. I don't know if we can touch on, you know, it ultimately is what's the best that can be done with the time and resources and energy. So I don't think that my expectation isn't that we do everything, but those are some areas I thought I want to make sure to bring up that were concerns to me.
I'm not, you know, sitting right here, Ezra, I'm not 100% sure what we will be able to do, but I can take this back to our student services team at the elementary level and our library media team at the elementary level. I think, you know, the primary focus of the student services staff right now has been connecting families that don't have technology, following up on kids that have really kind of disengaged, make sure everything's okay. And I think for our library media folks, they've been extremely involved in helping their teaching colleagues, getting all of their new technologies to work smoothly. But, you know, we're several weeks into this now, and I will ask what we can do for kids in that area in the last few weeks here. That's certainly something that I'll take back.
That sounds great. And once again, I want to, you know, having, you know, elementary and intermediate school child doing the school, I know it's a lot for the kids. I know it's a lot for the teachers. And, you know, my job has moved online a lot, and that's exhausting in a different way. So I don't want to put it out. I don't want to have it come across of anything. I mean, I think people are doing the best, and just some things to consider.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When I know my son's 4K class, they are delivering videos for them to watch, like they're recording, the teacher's recording reading stories and activities over it used to be on regular YouTube, but now it's in some safe YouTube site.
Safe TV or something like that.
Yeah. So if, you know, if there are, you know, you feel that there's pertinent information that still does need to get out this year, maybe there's a teacher that would be willing to record that and you could deliver it in that manner.
That's a good suggestion, Michelle. We have started to use some different, I mean, delivering content via YouTube can be fine, but then depending on what the controls are on the device the student's watching YouTube on, it can lead into other areas.
some totally different platform. It says Safe YouTube. It's not a regular, when it comes up, all I see is that particular video, nothing else. I don't really know what it is, but it's
Using
not,
Flipgrid?
it's not Flipgrid. It just comes up and there's like a blue screen and it says Safe YouTube. And all that's on there you can see is that specific video. You can't click or link to anything else.
Yeah, there's a tool, and I'm not sure it's the same one that our 4K
Yeah.
program's using, Michelle, but there's a program, I just looked it up to make sure I've got the right term here. It's called SafeShare TV, so
Maybe.
safeshare.tv, and I know we've used that some at the elementary level. So,
Yeah, and I can find out too if you want what
if
they're
you could, yeah, that would be, or
Yeah.
I'll talk to Amy Johnson and find out, but I'd
Yeah.
also like, if you can send that to me as a parent, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anything else on the 4th grade topic? Okay, so the 8th grade, so if the 4th grade presented the challenges of, we tried to kind of pull back and now we're trying to decide what to add in 8th grade, our conversation was, let's try to find materials that'll work for remote learning, that will hit the targets, for the grade level. And however, I think just overall, there's some very important topics at all grade levels, but including at 8th grade. And a question we had was, what if, due to the topics, due to the format, we see some higher opt-outs, or as we get, we hope everybody is really engaging in their learning through the end of the school year, but what if we have some kids that don't engage as much in May, that we might want to add in a few selected topics to the 9th grade Intro to Phi Ed class as kind of an insurance policy. And so when the 8th grade instructors and the 9th grade Phi Ed instructors and I met, kind of where that group is thinking is, let's see how the 8th grade unit goes, but if there are concerns about student engagement, then we might want to select some key topics and integrate those. And obviously there'd be some Phi Ed topics that would need to come out. And as a result, we wouldn't be looking to kind of move the whole 8th grade unit over, it'd just be selected topics. But if we don't do something like that and we really had engagement issues, then you've got a 2-year gap between 8th grade and 10th grade at a really critical period for a lot of teens. Now, of course, our hope is we see high levels of engagement in the unit, and this really isn't an issue, but did want to raise that as a possibility. Now, they've also done a pretty wholesale substitution of the learning materials because, we've had a transition in instructors in 8th grade health. Some of the older materials were, were good in their time, but they hadn't really been updated in a while. And some of the key topics, including contraception, really weren't addressed in the actual documents themselves, and were much more dealt with in a question and answer format in the classroom, which didn't really translate well to the remote learning environment. So the 8th grade health team, looked at the standards and did their best to provide materials, but some of our 8th grade standards are, open to different interpretations. And I do want to kind of swing back in a moment to the issue of the materials, because there've been some differing perspectives on the materials. I do want to get feedback on that. But before we get to that, just want to kind of get your perspective on the specific question of if we don't see good student engagement in this 8th grade health unit in May, would you be supportive of us adding some of those topics and working with the 9th grade Phi Ed team into 9th grade health next year?
Yes,
Yes.
I think it'd be great.
Absolutely.
Are you then gonna give, again, is the same rules apply for students being able to opt out of those is
Yes,
like
yes.
Okay, and parents will be fully aware of what is being taught and all that. as
Yes,
well?
anything, that's a great question, Michelle. Anything we would add to ninth grade Phi-Ed as a human growth and development topic, we would follow the same notification procedures. So families would be aware of what's being taught and have the opportunity to opt their child out of that instruction. And we would provide some kind of alternate activity in lieu of that. Yeah, definitely, good question. Yeah, because we really haven't had ninth grade has been one, this is something we talked about. Ninth grade is one of our gap years. So, I mean, that overall approach, are you comfortable with that overall approach?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, one thing I would like your feedback on is, the eighth grade health team, was in a situation where they really had to kind of relook at the materials for this unit because of the situation. So there are important topics where we really didn't have much in the way of written materials. It had been mainly a Q&A discussion, a high quality Q&A discussion in class, but nothing that we could really package for the remote learning environment. And so they selected materials, and I apologize for only getting it to you tomorrow, but I did share kind of the outline that they had provided to parents with links to the materials. And that was the instructor's perspective on what would align with the scope and sequence. They shared it with me, they shared it with Marcy, the middle school principal, and Marcy and I felt they did align. But, it's been brought up, and it's certainly the case. And, here's an example right here. One of our targets for that level is identify methods of contraception, including failure rates and negative side effects. And what does that actually mean in practice? Does that mean, some of the questions that have been brought up, and, I think Michelle may have some perspectives on this, and so she may be able to do better justice to some of the questions than I can, but emergency contraception, is that something that would be covered under this learning target? Withdrawal method, is that something that would be covered? Does that mean that we actually have a video demonstration of applying a condom? So these are all things open to interpretation, and the health team, brought their perspective to it. But you can definitely see, looking at the target, how people might look at it differently. And so, normally we don't do a lot in terms of, our scope here in the committee is more to look at scope and sequence and curriculum than it is to really look at individual learning materials, because once you get into that in fine detail in terms of prior approval, you could basically have this committee meet weekly for a year. I do like the idea of having this committee kind of coming back in after the fact and giving feedback. However, due to kind of the extraordinary nature of these shifts, did want to get your feedback on, one, if you've had a chance to look at those documents, alignment, questions about emergency contraception, withdrawal, things like that. And then thoughts on, for the future, as we look at some of these learning targets, do they need a greater degree of specificity to reduce the possibility for different interpretations, or are they fine in kind of their scope as is? And Michelle, you've been, really diligent and sincere in, raising some really good questions on this. And so I'm wondering if you would kind of be willing to kind of share your perspective on this first.
On the alignment, or just
all of the above.
Oh boy. I don't know. I guess my daughter will be in 8th grade, so I received all the information and dug into it and looked at all the learning materials. I guess, as I've spoken or mentioned to Tim, I guess I was just really shocked to see that we were using new materials. I don't know, I was under some impression that there was, at least for human growth materials, that it was something that the board actually approved, that the curriculum committee approved, or had some say in it. I didn't realize that it was solely up to the teacher's discretion to find these new learning materials. So that was a little bit shocking and concerning to me, because I feel like I would have, in my opinion, wanted to see a little bit more. And I know time is of essence. I know we don't have the time. And like Tim said, we could, meet for a year looking through all curriculum and debating it and all that. And is that something that we would want to do? So, that's stuff that's rolled around my head. And like, I brought up this interpretation thing. I started to think like, so the materials that are outlined, that they sent to us parents to review, they do include defining all forms of birth control, including emergency contraception, withdrawal. There was a video activity in one of the materials that links you to a video. It's a cute illustration of contraception. It's got this guy called a contraceptinator. It's quite silly. And it does show putting a condom on. And so I was kind of shocked by that, because I feel like that's something that I thought we had mentioned in the group that we weren't going to do. And I don't even believe we do that at the 10th grade level. So upon reading all this, I was really shocked by, in my mind, by some of the stuff that I came across. And I was like, wait a second. I don't even believe we do this at the 10th grade level. I talked to my daughter and asked her what they did this year. And she says, well, I don't remember anything. She's in 10th grade. Oh, well, maybe I remember all we learned was about STDs and rape. Then I asked her about contraception. She said they didn't learn anything about contraception. So it's like, wow, well, our 8th graders are now going to be even more educated than them. So I don't know. It's just been real eye-opening for me to have read that material, and it was different with, in my mind, what I thought even what we came up with, this new scope and sequence. I don't even see it fully aligning with that, and that was my interpretation of it. So I do have feedback from Kelly Klein, right? She says they're not planning on actually showing that video of putting the condom on, but they are going to be talking about all forms of birth control, obviously with abstinence as, the main thing to use against pregnancy and STDs, but they are also including emergency contraception and withdrawal. So I don't know if anybody, if you want me to elaborate on anything else or any other questions.
Well, why don't we see if there are other perspectives, Michelle, and we can definitely come back.
Helpful.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, it's good to hear the parent perspective on that. And, the whole discussion we've had, recently has got me to thinking about the benefits of greater clarity. Brenda, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just kind of curious as I was listening, as a parent, Michelle, I have to agree with you that that would be a pretty surprising bit of information to receive. And I'm just wondering if our 8th grade teachers communicated with any other 8th grade teachers in other districts to find out how they're managing this topic and how they may have presented it to their students. Do you know, Tim?
I don't know specifically who they spoke with. I think as they went through this process, they did talk to some colleagues in other districts about suggestions for materials. But I don't think they did a district by district survey of how this was being approached. I know, without having any specific details and talking with colleagues who do what I do, that in different districts, they're facing the similar situation where they had to shift to remote learning before they got to some key units at different grade levels in human growth and development. But I couldn't say specifically what DeForest is doing or Lodi or Madison or anything.
Yeah, I was just hoping that maybe there was something we could piggyback off of, you know, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Um, yeah, it kind of seems to me like that needs to be reviewed a little bit more deeply by our committee, um, before it's presented to the kids, because I guess it would be setting a precedent going forward if we just intend this to be kind of a year where we do things a little bit differently. I think it could set a precedent for going forward that would concern me. And I guess that's where I'm falling in line.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of, you know, it's prior approval of instructional materials. I think gets a lot into what, you know, would be a big part of, you know, what we ask teachers to do on a prior approval basis. But I think bringing stuff in, you know, it'd be similar to if we had to prior approve any of the modifications we made to fourth grade here. But I do like the idea of looking more at the actual materials and giving feedback on these, because I think part of it, it's the newness of the materials. And, you know, part of it is I looked at what was actually previously delivered in 8th grade. I can see that there might have been some benefits from review of the enacted materials prior to this as well. So that's one reason why I do think as we go through the process, I do want the materials that come out of the revision coming back for not necessarily approval, but for feedback that we can then take back to teachers. Is this kind of in target with what we were thinking about when we were talking about the scope and sequence? You know, and I think, you know, this is a great illustration. You know, what did we mean? You know, so they're trying to hit the old scope and sequence, the one that's our current scope and sequence, but both the current scope and sequence and this committee's recommendations refer to contraception being presented with, you know, failure rates, negative consequences, effectiveness, you know, in the 8th grade curriculum. And we never really defined what methods we had under that term. And so, you know, withdrawal, emergency contraception, were those things when we had contraception that we envisioned as a committee as being under that, or were they not? And I think that's an important thing, because then, you know, the teacher gets the learning target. It's no different than when, you know, you look at a Common Core standard or something else. Then you have to make sense of, with the materials that you have, or need to go find additional materials, how does that play out in the actual classroom? So I think there's the alignment issue, but then aligning to what? I mean, we may want these standards to be a little more specific to provide better guidance.
I would agree with that.
Other thoughts?
You know, I think that I'm a little surprised as well, simply because it doesn't seem like, you know, like Michelle and Brenda mentioned, doesn't seem to align with what's been taught in the scope and sequence previously. And I know our committee has talked about some different options and how we want to approach it. I'd say in a different way than the past. But it was my understanding that that's what we were bringing to the curriculum committee to move forward with. So it's not even that, you know, I think we can take away any feelings of the direction of it aside and say, this seems like it's going like beyond maybe the step where we are. And I don't know who's making the choice to choose these things. I know, you know, like we talked about before, it's a unique time and having to figure out what materials are available, what can we use. And yeah, and when it comes to contraception, I think, you know, my own thought is, as far as like withdraw or the other one, sorry, I'm like spacing right now, but as far as those, I think it makes sense to have them in a conversation about contraception, because when young people are exploring options, those are ones, whether, you know, whatever we think, they're going to be exploring, right? Like, oh, what if, you know, like, so we know that, but I think that's not as much the issue. Those things is this moving ahead of where we are? And I feel like it is, to my understanding of our process.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Well,
just
I think
wondering,
go ahead, Barb. Yeah.
is our job tonight to choose whether we're going to give a complete, comprehensive, safe ideas going forward? Is it our job to choose what angle we're going with that tonight?
So, you know, my hope in putting,
because I think there's a lot of
yeah, my hope was to get some feedback from the group about kind of, you know, where you felt this was on alignment, and give us some guidance going forward about how specific we might want these benchmarks to be. You know, because you know, the whole set of materials were shared. They're not all going to be used. There's still time for the instructor, you know, to maybe do some fine tuning on this. There's no question these are a shift. I mean, so we've had this standard in the 8th grade health class for quite some time on providing information on methods of contraception, including failure rates and effectiveness. Mm-hmm. I went back and I looked at a parent letter from 2017, and it was clear in that the contraception topic was not actually presented from an activities or documentation basis in class. It was addressed through question and answer. And the unit assessment didn't have an item, and it was a lengthy unit assessment, did not have an item on contraception on it. So I think part of what's going on is that, you know, I think in the past, you could have a perspective that maybe the contraception target was not fully covered in the course. And now it's being very thoroughly covered in the way these materials are. So the shift is very dramatic. I think the question is, from our overall sense of where we want to be in 8th grade on this, where do we really want to end up? And so,
to make safe and healthy choices for relationships, right? Yeah. And we should be comprehensive about it. But well, I'm not sure if the whole group feels that way.
So, you know, it's kind of in these unprecedented times that we are really having to kind of hone in, and some of the things that maybe we were leaning towards before, or that we were looking at overall, have come to light that maybe we just need to redo them in a very different fashion. And maybe this is a glimpse of one of those where we go, oh, maybe we didn't get as comprehensive as we thought we should have, and that we really do need to be pushing in a different direction and offering more. And so we thought that way as a committee, but now we've been given new light and we've given new opportunity. And some of the stuff, I kind of liked what they were rolling out. And so then how to do that, and how to use the knowledge that we're being given and the feedback that we're being given to really create very healthy adults, to make very positive and wise choices moving forward with really substantial amount of information to be able to make safe choices.
I think one of the pieces of that is when we think about it in that light, Kristen, I think maybe that overall message of being able to educate the students to make those good decisions and be healthy as an adult. I'm not sure that that information, at least that that target has been stated to families. And correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't know that maybe the adults in the children's households have understood that to be the direction that we want to support. Versus just the education piece of it. We're looking at this as a whole child, as a whole young adult, versus just, what's the quote unquote sex education that they're going to get. So in my mind, there needs to be a broad understanding from the adults in the homes to help us with that understanding with our children. And I just don't think that we're there yet. And I think that, yes, this is kind of an emergency discussion because we want to make sure that our kiddos get what they need in this remote learning. But understanding that this is an unprecedented time, how do we make this information available and presentable to younger minds without giving too much, because they don't have the safety and security of a classroom necessarily to learn this in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's really that makes a ton of sense. And, that's really one of the big trade-offs we have is that, prior contraception was dealt with strictly on a facilitated question and answer in the 8th grade health classroom, which, even if you use some video conferencing, is very difficult to replicate in the online environment. Mm-hmm. And so you lose that. And that's a real detriment to some of the things you can conduct with the unit that way. Now, there's a corresponding advantage, which is parents could get the information on request. As a committee, we've talked about the value of making all of our materials very much online, and that's our long-term goal as part of this process. One of the advantages of the remote learning experience is that the student, I'm going to use child, but these are 8th graders. They are engaging with the unit at home. Parent can be right there, depending on their other responsibilities, and very proximate to their student, guiding them through, some family discussions on these topics that would, kind of conform to the family's values and the family's perspective.
As long as the adults in the
we
house
lose the facilitated conversation with loss, but there's the opportunity for more direct involvement in the home rather than the student gets it during the day at school and then maybe it's a dinner table or living room conversation that evening. It can be a little more simultaneous.
Yeah, Tim, I think as long as the child, the 8th grader, has an adult in the household that will participate with them. Even in our younger grades, there's kiddos who are doing all this work on their own without the involvement of a parent because the parent is working or out of the house working or whatever. So I think that makes sense as long as the parent is there to have that conversation with, or a guardian or other trusted adult.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone who hasn't?
If there's not an adult there, what is the risk of the kids having the information without an adult? What are we afraid of that the child will do with the information? That they'll pass it on in a bad way through social media or something like that? Or
Barb, with you saying that, something I think about is
I'm just playing devil's advocate. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think about 8th graders as you say that, and
Mm-hmm.
I think about how many 8th graders have access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
and have their own personal cell phones that they do that. And I would make an uneducated guess just on my end from knowing teenagers and working with them for, many years. Most of them are finding things that are not of the curriculum, that are much more intense and graphic than what's being shared. And I'm not saying that green light everything that we're saying, but I think you bring up a good point of this gives the school district an opportunity to guide them in a controlled way, rather than just like, okay, they're going to be online looking up how to put on a condom. And if you ever search anything online, images pop up, right? And all the different things. So I do see what you're saying. I think it's, what can be the harm, but I also bet that there's probably a lot of parents who would be really frustrated and upset. It's challenging, right? I agree.
Jolie, Peyton, I don't think, no obligation to chime in, but I want to make sure you've got an opportunity to share your perspective if you want to. I mean, one thing I will say, and I really take, for better or for worse, responsibility for this is, I looked at the standard methods of contraception. I looked at the material, and I always try to be open with all of you. The idea that the withdrawal method or emergency contraception might be something that might not come under methods of contraception didn't really occur to me. But I now know from this discussion that other people may see that differently, and so I do think any additional perspectives on that. I will say this. I mean, there's a lot of we have great teaching professionals in our district. I think education requires teachers exercising their professional judgment. I think on important topics like human growth and development, one where there is an advisory process, I think it's reasonable, though, not necessarily on a prior approval basis. Certainly, that's not what state statute contains. But I think the concept of bringing more inactive units back for some feedback, I think, is valuable to make sure there's more consistent understanding. So I will say, when the larger updates come through, I do see these units kind of coming back to this committee next year. This was just kind of a more abbreviated situation, and I do apologize for kind of the concern and uproar it's created.
Well, Tim, if I can just say, you said something just then that helped me see this conversation in a little different light, because I thought we were talking about a larger, curriculum moving ahead without, going to the board. You just mentioned that the team presented you with something and it included 2 items of contraception that might not have been discussed before, the withdrawal and then the pill. And I think, I'm not in the health field, but those are legitimately 2 methods of contraception that people consider with that. So I don't see how anybody could have, I don't want to, that's harsh to say, but it seems completely rational that if they're talking about contraception, that those 2 are included. Those are ways, if, Barb might be able to speak on this, if you went to a doctor and were asked ways, those might be 2 ways that they would say, and with the withdrawal, they would probably say, wow, you've heard of that, that's really risky, or this pill, okay, do you understand what it does? And the results and emotional part. That Barb could probably speak to, but it seems ridiculous to me that that we would think those two are not part of a conversation on contraception. So I think
it's just an uncomfortable conversation to have, but it needs to be done because these things are happening in the middle school and high school.
And I would agree, because 8th graders are talking to me about engaging in sexual activity, and what are they choosing? Withdrawal. And we're having to have a conversation about how that's risky. And they're having conversations with their friends about it. Some of it, they're also playing a game with it, like it, and it's real, it's there. And I think we need to call attention to it, which also tells me when that kind of comes up that, okay, it's just an opportunity for us to reassess and to look, and as adults to go, wow, we really need to be including these things. These are things that kids clearly have spoken about, have brought up, and clearly needs to be addressed. And I think giving information to kids about that helps them, again, make safe choices for their bodies and for others, and to be able to kind of move in a different way to take care of themselves.
And an opportunity for us to talk about how that affects relationships, and that piece of it that we have talked about very strongly about the importance of teaching, showing, explaining healthy relationships, and that's just part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that. That I've got two thoughts here though, and maybe it's just I don't want to think that I'm ignorant on this level, but I guess I assumed that like an emergency pill kind of thing was after the fact versus a contraceptive before the act of physically engaging in intercourse. So I guess I think of the pill as being contraception. I don't think of the emergency pill as being contraceptive, but I understand that it's preventative in nature, and maybe I'm just thinking differently than the reality is. But I think the other piece of it is if I think going forward, I'm in complete agreement with where, Barb and Kristen, where this is going. I'm just thinking in this remote environment, I just get concerned about the fact that it's one thing to have the safety and security of a classroom and an adult that's hopefully respected in the form of a teacher presenting this information in a classroom setting. However, when you think about it being, and I don't even know how the 8th grade teachers are planning on presenting this information, but if it is solely just online in an asynchronous fashion, I guess that there might need to be just a little bit of tightening up on what's presented. I don't know. That's just kind of where my head is going right now.
Right. Because you want some control of it.
Right. And I'll just say, for me personally, I've gone through all the learning materials. I've read through all of them in detail. I don't love the messaging in them, and I don't precisely know what the teacher, Kelly, I assume, is planning to fully use in them. Now, I've asked her specific questions on things I'm concerned about, but overall, I don't know how she's going to present it. So for us as a family, we are actually opting out of it. I think the remote learning, just with so much time with my daughter and even my older daughter having it, for us, I have a lot of other ideas. I have access to a bunch of other videos and resources, and that's what we're going to do. So yeah, I appreciate those materials being available, but I am personally concerned. There's a lot of detail to them, and I don't quite know what she is and isn't going to use.
And I think that's where I'm kind of getting at for purposes of this spring. Whereas I think it has to be discussed again in, you know, for spring 2021 and going forward. So it kind of seems like we're all on the same page, I think.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I think, especially for some of the more key, you know, I mean, we have human growth and development content at all of the levels. But something I would envision happening as part of this check-in basis next year would be for some of our key areas, and I think in particular the 8th grade health and the 10th grade health. What I would envision would actually be inviting one of the instructors to come in and walk the committee through how they've responded to the updates as they've gone from the committee's recommendation forward, you know, to the teachers. So you can get a sense of their thinking, you know, ask questions, you know, and I think, you know, I think there's a lot to be learned from this. I mean, I think it does show the benefits of making all the materials available, but then being, you know, potentially more clear. And it's tough for the teachers because they had to do this on a quicker timetable than they would normally do. But I also think it's one thing to put the materials out. I think that's something we discussed. I think it's going to be a net positive. But I think helping parents to understand when they do see those materials, a little bit of how it might be enacted, you know, I think, you know, is a component that's important too. So, I mean, I'm sure they're going to, you know, look at this meeting as one of the aspects of the virtual meeting, as it's available in a way that our other meetings, unless somebody dropped in, couldn't see. So I think this has been a very informative discussion, and I think it's been a very, I think, you know, both, you know, now, but I think more importantly for kind of our longer term work in this area, I think this has been a very productive discussion. Helpful to me, certainly. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. So,
I'm just glad that it brought some of these things up to the surface, because I think there's some real information to discuss, and the options out there for families and parents, and to know that they can opt out and know that they can choose to not. And I think we have to think of our own responsibility as a school district of providing information, but it is tricky. It's a fine line. And there's so many
it
other
is a fine
things that are
line,
involved.
there are real trade-offs with the remote environment. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a fine line, and something that Brenda said that Brenda, you are totally right in the way of, you know, does this like emergency pill, is it contraception, you know, and where does that fall? And I think, you know, what came to my mind, and I didn't get to address it right away, is no matter what, like technically it might be, I think that people are using it as, you know, what a contraceptive would be of a pregnancy preventer in a way. So I think that's probably where it falls in the discussion. And that's where Barb was just saying, it's this fine line, and how do we address it? And yeah, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So many religious, family, cultural, all kinds of pieces to it. So we have to look back to what our responsibility is.
So next steps. I just kind of want to reiterate where we are at. So thank you very much for your direction on kind of those scope and sequence changes, potentially for that one-time 5th grade compacting and the one-time 9th grade Phi-Ed for next year. So I'm going to work to schedule a curriculum committee meeting in the next few weeks to take up those one-time recommendations and also some things we have on non-human growth and development related topics that'd be better for the board to take up sooner than later in other areas of curriculum and instruction. But then there will be, and the board's kind of in a reorganization mode right now, the curriculum committee will have some membership shifts between the first meeting and the second meeting in all likelihood. And so the curriculum committee will meet again probably in the second half of May to take up your full recommendations from March 3rd. And I do think the discussion we've had today about specificity what is and what isn't contraception. I think that's something that will at least be on the radar as the curriculum committee engages in this issue. The curriculum committee, and it may take one meeting, it may take more than one meeting, will review that set of recommendations, and then we'll recommend updates to the scope and sequence to the full board. Now that could be your recommendations as is, our recommendations as is, or the curriculum committee could make some changes to that. After the curriculum committee, it will go to the full board, and the same thing. It might be a one meeting, it might be a two meeting process. The full board will look at what it gets from the curriculum committee. It may adopt it as is. It may, as a full board, make some adjustments to it. Once we know what those are, two things will happen. One is the teaching staff will be hopefully working over the summer to update the units in response to the updated scope and sequence, and look at, are we needing to consider additional materials to reflect the updates to the scope and sequence. There'll also be communication to parents at large about what the updates as adopted by the board are. And I do envision part of that communication process involving an information session similar to the one we conducted in the high school PAC back in February. I think it was early February. If we are still in a social distancing mode well into the summer, it's possible that we might conduct that information session virtually. It's just one of those things we'll have to play by ear depending on what kind of situation we're in as a local area. Then, as we've discussed before, and again, you know, Peyton, you and the other seniors is probably not a live option, but we'd like to reconvene the committee next year to get some insight on how are these new units looking? What are these new materials like? I do like the idea of bringing in some of the instructors for the real linchpin courses. You know, fourth grade Brenda might be part of that as well. And just saying what this looks like. You know, we've had a whole theme on social media and internet safety. So we may also want to bring in some of our instructors that work in that area to kind of walk the committee through what we're doing to get feedback on, is this, you know, are we hitting the target? You know, even if this is matching from a, does this teach that basis? The answer to that might be yes, but is the maturity level maybe a little higher than we want? Is the maturity level a little younger than we want? You know, those kinds of feedback that a committee like this can really provide a lot of very useful service. So that's kind of how this will play out really over the next year or so. Now, again, I think, you know, one thing I'll have to ask, Judy, this will be something I'll probably need to come back to the board on, is we have some seniors on the committee. One of them, Peyton, is on our meeting tonight, but we may need to appoint some new student members to the committee, and that would be a board action item. Because as valuable as Peyton and the other seniors have been, once they graduate, we probably need to replace them on the committee, even if they're just great people. So that's something that might come to the board in the late summer or fall. So,
Logical.
Rebecca, you've had a little gold box around your name a few times. Did we get any email at all on public comments that we need to have before we conclude for the day?
There have been no public comments.
Okay, good to know. Thanks for sticking with us and supporting us through this process. So with that, you know, those curriculum committee meetings will be noticed. I will reach out separately to you as an advisory committee and make sure you're well advised of when those meetings are happening, because you've been instrumental in this whole process. We're coming up on 6:30 in a little bit. Very helpful meeting. If you have questions, reach out to me, and I can't meet with any of you in person face-to-face, but if you want to have a phone call or a video conference, I'm always open to that. And if circumstances allow us, and I sure hope they will, maybe we can get together for a non-business, you know, meeting in the summer with maybe some pie or other snacks involved, that would be, I think, just a great thing. But we'll have to play that by ear. So, anything else for us this evening?
I just really look forward to having more of the teachers, some feedback from those who are actually teaching it. Really appreciate Brenda and her 4th grade right on task with letting us know what do kids at that age need. And Kristen, you're really in touch with the social piece of it, and that's really important too. So thank you, everybody. I don't mean to just nail down 2 people, but I think everybody has a really good, important part in this. So it's good to put our heads together.
It is. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
you're a great committee, and your commitment and your willingness to share your perspectives openly, I value tremendously. This is probably one of the most enjoyable committees I get to work with. Second to the curriculum committee, Judy. Curriculum committee is number 1. You know, you're a great group. I really appreciate that about you. And, you know, I do think that while the way the state statute runs these days, we're kind of restricted in how many teachers can actually be on the committee. I do think as our work goes forward, getting more staff in to come in as not members of the committee, but folks that present to committee meetings, I think would be very helpful.
Yes.
And I'd be remiss, you know, you guys are all super valuable, but I do want to, just because we have Barb on the call, put a big thank you to Barb and all of our other fantastic healthcare workers here in our community in the greater Madison area and nationally for all that you're doing to help keep everybody safe and well during this epidemic. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we're all pulling together, so thank you.
Yep, excellent. Well, if that's it, I think we'll wind it up. And Rebecca, I've been a participant in some of these things. I guess I'm going to ask Rebecca for your technical assistance. Do we just adjourn this now and end the Zoom meeting? Is that what we do?
Yes, that is what you do.
Thank you for always having my back, Rebecca. I appreciate it. So, meeting's adjourned. I will keep you posted, and at some point in the fall, we will get back together. So thank you very much, and enjoy your summers if I don't see you, and hopefully we'll get a little informal thing together in the summer that's not a business meeting. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
Good luck, Peyton.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck, Peyton.
Yes, bye, Peyton. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, stop my share.